it's my great pleasure to introduce the moderator of our next session, Janaka. Hi there. Good afternoon or good morning, whichever it may be. Janaka is the Director, EMEA Data Strategy and Analytics at Johnson & Johnson. And without further ado, I'd like to hand him over to take things away. Over to you, sir. You're on mute, I'm afraid, Janaka.
It's a great start.
No, we all do it. Over to you.
Thanks, appreciate it, Simon. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here today with you to be the moderator for this particular session. As introduced, I'm Janaka, Atugoda. I lead data strategy for EMEA, Johnson & Johnson. You know, there's a lot of talk around IDs and just the things that are going on around the ad tech industry. And I would say some of us might be a little fatigued with all the conversations going on around cookies going away, mobile ad IDs being restricted, and so on. But it is, of course, a very seismic change, a shift that's happening in our ecosystem, and it merits talking about. And really, fundamentally, it's about uncertainty and dealing with uncertainty. So I think these sessions provide a fantastic way to better understand how we can chart a path through this uncertainty. So today we have two very important pieces of guiding us through this potential solutions: Contextual, and of course IDs, and because of all of the changes around Google's third-party cookies going away, as well as them on the Chrome level, and then also, of course, them Google not accepting any IDs and moving towards a cohort-based system. These particular solutions around ID, alt IDs, and Contextual is going to be a significantly more important. Without further ado, I just wanted to introduce the two speakers. Bruce Biegel, Senior Managing Partner at Winterberry Group USA, and Eugene Becker, EVP, Global GM Data and Identity at Acxiom. So we're going to start off with Bruce. Bruce, over to you.
How about unmuting? Janaka, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. Mathieu, perhaps we will tee up the slides. There we go. So today I'm going to speak a little bit about context and trying to understand where it fits in today's market. We've had a lot of change. We've seen a lot of transformation in the last year. You know, obviously the biggest driver of why does contextual matter is privacy in the consumer. It's the restriction of identifiers. It's cookie deprecation. It's not just Apple and Google. We expect to see this from the other browsers who haven't adopted yet. It's about understanding, and we've heard so much about trust and first-party relationships. But it's not just about privacy. I think we're also seeing a transformation of media. So we think about the walled gardens and the contextual signals that they get. We think of the rise of retail marketplaces and think about Amazon and how much search data they are collecting to complement the product information, the transaction information. But it's not just Amazon, it's Walmart, it's Kroger, it's over 100 different retail marketplaces. It's about this shift to linear, from linear into digital video, connected TV, OTT, addressable TV. How does all that mix, which never had a cookie ecosystem in the first place? We think about challenges in measurement and attribution that all of the above is driving. But nonetheless, the marketers are still coming and saying, hey, We need to do a better job of customer-centric marketing. We need better decisioning. We need to unify it. And we need to organize our supply chain. So understanding all of these are driving this shift, not just, okay, we're going to lose cookies. Okay. There we go. So when we started to dive in, so we did a lot of research last year on identity and on collaborative systems. And where we started to come out was, you know, there are three kinds of intent and context that we should be looking at. The first of those is search intent, sometimes known as search intelligence, which is that real-time search data. So yes, of course, Google has a lot of that, and Microsoft with Bing has a lot, but it's also that product search in that product box on a site, or in the search bar on a publisher's site. And search intelligence is another set of informed intent, and that fits. And it's similar to context, but a little bit different. Behavioral intent, you know, that aggregated data of site behavior and engagement is another signal that we're looking for to help inform us as we lose other identifiers. And then you get to contextual, and contextual intelligence, either at that page level, understanding what's on the page, or at that keyword. And you can see how it starts to overlap with search intent and behavioral, but it's very, very separate, because all of this being non-PII and anonymized. And then you get into identity, which is that combination of data attributes linked together to provide that profile. And so as we think about what comes next in this post-cookie, we start to think about how the landscape itself is evolving, and how do you use those identifiers either alone or in partnership. So when we think about personalization unknown, the world of MarTech, what happens on my website? There is first-party cookies, there is first-party data, and there is also a tremendous amount of contextual data. People don't really think about it in that first-party context, but it's very much there. In the world of paid programmatic, it's of course there, and it's been understood and transacted on for 20 years. And the question becomes, you know, where does it go from here? How do I make it smarter? What other signals can I wrap in, either from search or from behavioral, to make that context smarter, better, and more predictive? And then we start to move into advanced TV, addressable CTV, so some characteristics of programmatic, but also they think about context differently in the TV ecosystem, in the linear and broadcast. So again, context will have a different role and a different interpretation as you start to think about, okay, what comes next? One of the areas that we're starting to dive into is, okay, just like in the ID ecosystem and the collaborative data environments, you know, there's a lot of, who is in control of this? Is this about the publisher? Is the publisher an advertiser? Is it the publisher, the advertiser, data platforms? Is it the technology platform? Where does all this contextual fit? Who will control contextual? Is it third parties? Is it those that are searching? Or is it some sort of partnership? As you shift into your own site, that changes again, and it becomes more in the advertiser's control. But ultimately, it's going to be the tech platforms and the data platforms partnering together to provide those tools and to provide that data that will make the advertiser and publisher ecosystem work. At this point, I think we have more questions than we do answers. You know, so how do we think this is going to evolve? What are the primary use cases that apply to contextual? When is that different from identity? Where does this live in the waterfall? You know, what kind of skills do we need to make the best use? How do we have to adapt the organization? And frankly, what are the key considerations that we should be thinking about? You know, we've sized most of the identity landscape and many of its components, but I don't think I've ever seen a market sizing for contextual and what that will look like downstream. So ultimately, I think we're kind of faced with more questions than answers. So as we have over the last 12 months, we tackled identity in a paper, we tackled collaborative data solutions in a research effort, and we are now going to kick off a research effort around context. And hopefully many of you will participate with us as we survey. Thank you, and back to Janaka.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. And we'll move into discussion right after this additional presentation from Eugene Becker. Over to you, Eugene.
Yeah, thanks, Janaka. I appreciate it. And Bruce, it's great to follow you. Certainly, context will have a big role to play in an ecosystem that's emerging. What I was hoping to do today is take a view more at the identity ecosystem and how identity has evolved in the media ecosystem over the past decade or so and where things are headed. Taking like a very broad historical view, basically in 2010, before ad tech happened, the world was dominated by people-based data, right? That was data, it was all tied to PII. And very quickly, as ad tech came into its own, companies like LiveRamp, BlueKai, Excelate, Newstar surged to prominence. And now I would say that if you think of data, it's kind of 50-50. There is still a very large and vibrant people-based data ecosystem. And there's obviously a lot of activity that's happening more in the media ecosystem based on anonymous or pseudonymous IDs. And this sets the stage for, I think, the transition that cookie and really more broadly deprecation of other IDs is setting up. As the world is moving from anonymous IDs to IDs that are based on hashed emails, there's sort of the question, what happens to this ecosystem that has emerged over the past decade? Does it remain structurally as it has been, or does it change, and how? And that's the question that I've been spending a bit of time thinking about. In answering that question, I found the following construct to be pretty interesting. If you think about the way the world of identity works today, the brands and publishers are in the blue circles. Everybody's cultivating their first party identity. They're linking their data to it. And these blue circles are typically connected by intermediaries or utilities that are in green. It could be an onboarder like LiveRamp or Newstar, Oracle, Data Cloud, could be Data Marketplace. Again, some of these players play a dual role. And this ecosystem has actually done an amazing job of connecting more entities together than ever before. And there is orders and orders of magnitude more data being exchanged now than ever used to be the case before this ecosystem came into its own. Now, with that said, after 10 years in existence, we're hearing, that there is room for evolution. Increasingly, if you're talking to brands and publishers, everybody is looking to invest in the blue circles. They believe that the private graph is a core asset to be cultivated. It's going to be the thing that's going to drive differentiation in the marketplace. Brands are doing this, publishers are doing this. While, I think onboarders and data marketplaces are doing really well and are continuing to fulfill the market function, more often than not, we hear a little bit of grumbling, right? These are utilities. Everybody has access to them. There is a cost to them, but it doesn't really drive market differentiation. So there is a pent-up demand for something new. And this really provides the context for the shift that is being brought forth by deprecation of online IDs. And there's a lot happening there, but in terms of the fundamentals, the deprecation of online identifiers and a replacement of these, at least to some extent, by email-based identifiers, it makes matching much easier. So cookies are perishable and they disappear faster and faster. To maintain cookie syncs, you have to do a lot of work in real time, and your job is never finished. And that's really a big reason why there are these central identity utilities or identity clearinghouses that have come into existence. With emails, email matches are persistent. It's much easier to sync server to server. You can do it in batch. There's just a lot less technical pressure. So as we think of these two things, one, which is everyone is looking to invest in their private graph capabilities, private identity capabilities. I think that's kind of one trend. The second idea is that syncing data based on email IDs is just like so much easier than it is than syncing data based on cookies. What we are seeing is momentum for decentralization, where I wouldn't say that the green circles are in any way going to go away. I think they'll be around and continue to exist as they have, but we see a lot more activity in terms of brands and publishers exchanging data much more freely without the use of these intermediaries. And this is actually starting to manifest itself across the programmatic ecosystem in terms of how data enters that ecosystem. So historically, if you're a data provider, you're basically going to inject data either via an onboarder, if you're starting with PII, or directly into a data marketplace if you're a publisher, right? And then the data flows to DSPs or other demand-side platforms and at least an exchange. What we're seeing now is sort of a much broader set of connections. A brand can now send a list of emails and upload them to Trade Desk directly, right? Via unified IDs and drive exchange in this way. Both larger publishers and certainly SSPs have clean rooms, and you can do direct buys via publishers now via direct sync. You can generate deal IDs via an SSP, and all of this is sort of kind of speaks to the point that there's going to be greater decentralization and evolution away from these central identity clearinghouses. And I think it's going to make for a very interesting, couple of years as the ecosystem, really seeks out some of the answers in terms of how all of this is going to work. Just looking at this picture, one of the things that comes to my mind is like the topic of like supply path optimization, which has obviously been a big topic in the publisher community in terms of how do you want to send an impression? Do you send it to, what's the path in terms of header bidding SSPs? I think the same questions are going to arise across marketers looking to activate data. Like which of these paths make sense, or is it like all of them? And I don't believe anybody has really sorted the answer to that question. So to go back to the start of the presentation, it's our belief that the shift to persistent IDs is going to play a material, role in how the identity ecosystem evolves. And we think that, to some extent, there's going to be a shift back to identity graphs driven by PII, which is the traditional province of companies like Acxiom. Email, at the end of the day, is a people-based identifier. And we think that brands and publishers are going to be, investing much more heavily to generate their graphs and promote direct exchange of data. That's what we've been thinking about, and obviously, I think it's going to be, closely connected to other initiatives. Contextual advertising being one. Janaka, back over to you.
Thanks, Eugene. So just to pick up on some of the things that you've said, I have a question around scale. So obviously for large scale advertisers, reach is a really important part of the pie and what we want to do. And we want to continue to be precise in how we target people and not annoy them, etc. So how do you see one like PII-based solutions scaling to meet that reach requirement? We'll start with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. One, I just want to kind of answer that I don't think anybody knows, because this ecosystem is just coming together. So I think it's important to acknowledge there are unknown unknowns, and we all need to wait until these knowns, like the picture becomes more clear. Now, we're working on a solution. We're actually working on launching a solution as opposed to building a solution that is designed to maximize scale based on matching in this ecosystem. And again, that speaks to the importance of brands' first-party graphs. So I think, I don't believe that simply generating UIDs and matching them without an identity enrichment capability, I don't think that's the answer. And I think you'll see more solutions like that come to market. And the third thing I'll say, look, I think if you think of matching email to email, right, between an advertiser and a publisher, that is going to be a much higher fidelity match than what you currently get via matching that's more probabilistic via onboarding. So, there's certainly the concept out there that a scale, if scale goes down, which is certainly a possible scenario, the quality of that inventory and the quality of the data associated inventory could more than make up for that in terms of driving marketer ROI. I think, again, it remains to be seen how all of this plays out. But I think it's going to be a large, vibrant, and pretty dynamic ecosystem that is going to play a big part in marketer budgets.
Yeah, I would kind of add on to that. What we're hearing right now is that deterministic match through email identifiers could probably give you coverage somewhere in that 20–30% range. I've heard all the way up to 40%, but rarely does it dip much below the 20%. We think that waterfalls over to a probabilistic match. So more of, I think this is the right match. And that probabilistic will give you extension, probably up to 2/3 of the audience. And then we think contextual and AI-driven contextual will either complement that probabilistic and or extend, especially as you get into the long tail publishers that have less PII, less email-based data. So we think it's a waterfall process that we're looking at going forward, but it's, as Eugene said, it's very much to be determined. We are still in very early test and learn mode.
Awesome. So Bruce, in the machine learning scenario, how do you see that data coming into the machine learning algorithms, given that Chrome's going to block a vast majority of the data out there?
So it won't take all the identifiers away. I think there will still be technographic signals. There'll be device and machine signals. There will be other behavioral signals that you can combine. And as the application of machine learning is applied, it will get smarter in interpreting, okay, this context applies to this segment. And I think it's very much, this is going to be segment based. But you're going to have to be careful on the privacy issue, because I think that where we're going is, let's be GDPR compliant, because if we're going to solve for that, we're going to solve for almost anything that we see here in the US. So we're watching the solutions over in Europe pretty carefully, but we're also trying to decide, okay, what can we use? And if we lose that particular identifier or that piece of information, what can replace that digital signal and pair it with that context, either at the page or the keyword level.
Awesome, thank you, Bruce. So I was going to ask a similar question, but thanks, Norman. I'm going to read out your question to the panel. Do you see any major privacy challenges, especially in Europe, with extending? Oops, everything's moving. With extending email matching and exchanging. So I had a question just around, the primary reason that cookies and all of this pressure that's come from governments is around the combination and of data where users are not aware of it. So I just wanted to ask if you guys think that email matching itself will also come under fire eventually from governments.
Well, so a couple of points. I would say that in general, when it comes to Europe as well as global or markets outside of the US, the first question in my mind is, what is the availability of email for matching? Certain markets just have a much lower authentication rate of traffic on the publisher side, which has been something that's blocked onboarding solutions similar to LiveRamps from taking root to the same extent in Europe. So I think that's the first question. To what extent is this going to work outside of the US? I think in many markets, scale will be lower. From a privacy perspective, look, the brand and the publisher need to provide notice and choice. And I think there are similar principles Obviously, the way some of the rules and guidance is interpreted is different across the two sides of the pond. But those are the core principles. And I think it is easier to manage this stuff at the end of the day in a persistent environment than in the cookie-based environment. I think you can provide more transparency to users. So I don't want to kind of sound naive like, hey, the privacy issue goes away. It doesn't. It's going to remain a topic. But I think it's just more manageable in an email-based world than in the cookie-based world.
I don't know if we can predict, where the regulators will go.
No worries.
I think we can predict a little bit better in terms of we will have more regulation. I think they're going to push back harder on the walled gardens. And it is about permission. And ultimately that first party permission and being able to leverage that is going to be the most important key to what comes next.
Awesome. Thank you both, Eugene and Bruce.